When you talk about the Alien vs Predator franchise, in terms of the video game side of things, it honestly didn't go too bad. First off, there was a really cool arcade game made by Capcom. And it just had that mark of quality you used to get from those old 90s Capcom arcade games. Not to mention some of the dopest artwork too. I mean, check this out. Alien vs Predator on the Jaguar was pretty good too, considering it was running on a pretty old console. This came out in 1994 and it was developed by Rebellion Software, who followed it up in 1999 with Alien vs Predator for the PC, and by this point we're really cooking with gas. It offered up 3 campaigns, again like the Jaguar game, playing as either Marine, Predator or an Alien, and it was a huge improvement. This game is readily available and easily playable to this day, and the Marine campaign's still going to make you fill your trousers. That was followed up in 2001 with Monolith Productions' Alien vs Predator 2, and with this you get what most fans would agree is the best AVP game ever made. There was another game made in 2010, again developed by Rebellion Software, but I think most people would agree with me that AVP 2 is where it's at. The Marine campaign in this thing is still amazing, packed with moments of tension and suspense, horror, and then just pure adrenaline during some of the more action-packed combat sequences. You'll get to use iconic weaponry like the pulse rifle and the smart gun, as well as a flamethrower, minigun, and a shotgun for close encounters. All set around a story with the expectedly corrupt Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Classic.
Alright, let's move.
The Predator campaign tripped and stumbled a bit, but still lets you play as this technologically savvy warrior, blowing things to pieces and taking heads as trophies. I mean, the sound design for this campaign was so spot on to the film, making it feel even more authentic. Then the Alien campaign lets you play through an entire life cycle, starting out as a facehugger, then a chest burster, before finally a fully grown worker drone, as you made your journey back to the Hive to reach the Queen. In this campaign you were basically just tearing through the game world, biting people's heads off and ripping them to pieces. It was fast paced and frenetic, but also requiring a bit of subtlety, using vents to find less direct routes and ambushing your enemies. You even had a few boss fights against other predators. It was awesome. Aside from how frustrating it is to get this game running nowadays, I do think AVP 2 has stood the test of time, especially in the gameplay department. And it's just something that still feels like an absolute love letter to the films. Not to mention, it also had an insanely fun multiplayer mode too. It got overshadowed I think that year by Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which is kinda like when Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction clashed at the Academy Awards. I mean, if Forrest Gump had have had acid for blood and planted murderous embryos in people. Anyway, my point is, it was well deserved for all the praise it got, and it got followed up shortly after that with an expansion pack called Primal Hunt. And if you liked AVP 2 and talked about it so much that your school friends wouldn't play it just out of spite, well, you'd wonder what could possibly go wrong with Primal Hunt. Sadly though, Primal Hunt is a piece of shit. Instead of Monolith Productions, it was developed by Third Law Interactive, whose only other real claim to fame was Kiss Psycho Circus. Yeah, a first-person shooter based off a comic book that's based off the band Kiss's odd alter egos. I reviewed this game a while back too. It's kinda like what happens when someone tries to make a Serious Sam clone based off an obscure comic book series. It also happened to run on an earlier version of the engine used in AVP 2. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Now, with Primal Hunt, again you've got 3 campaigns. The Human, Predator, and then the Alien campaign. Though this time, instead of playing as a colonial marine, you're instead playing as a corporate soldier working for Weyland-Yutani. And instead of a normal drone Xeno, you're now a Pred Alien. The base game had 7 chapters for each campaign. This expansion pack has 3, and they barely last an hour each. All set as a prequel to what unfolded in Alien vs Predator 2. Now this isn't too bad. I mean, expansion packs generally weren't as long as the base games they were built off, but even for an expansion pack, this thing is so short. Reminds me a lot of the Nightmare levels for Blood 2. Another crappy expansion pack that can be finished in the better part of 30 minutes. In the corporate campaign, you're playing as Major Dunya, who actually played a pretty big role in AVP 2. She's the one who betrays the playable Marine Harrison when she finds out he's responsible for the death of her boyfriend Dimitri.
Oh. I'm sorry to hear that.
Dimitri, who for some reason now has a Russian accent, despite him never talking like that at all in the base game.
Yes, sir, General Rykov.
I'm working as fast as I can, Dimitri. If you don't like being out here, why did you volunteer?
Yeah, it's dangerous for you to be alone.
In the expansion pack, you actually get to see these two together as well, including a really awkward cinematic where she's taking a shower, and Dimitri's just kind of standing there watching her. I think it was just an excuse to chuck in some nudity. Anyway, Dunya's job is to work alongside her boss Rykov, again returning from AVP 2, and find some kind of artifact that's got the power to repel back xenomorphs. So she's sent in with a couple of red shirts to retrieve it. Unlike the Marine campaign in the base game though, the pacing here is all out of whack. The original Marine campaign knew how to space out the frequency in which you got into combat. I mean, for the entire first level of that campaign, there wasn't a single enemy to be seen. If it was the first time you were playing it, it would probably be close to 30 minutes in before you bagged your first Xeno. Playing as Dunya though, it's the complete opposite. Literally 30 seconds into starting and you just get bombarded with wave after waves of Xenos, who come literally out of the goddamn walls and pretty much do not stop for the remainder of this thankfully short-lived experience. And this is one of the biggest problems this campaign has, because as it turns out, taking on half a dozen Xenos every 15 seconds, when you're barely given all that much health, ammo or armor, doesn't make for the most enjoyable gameplay experience. Now look, I think I know why they did this, simply because this campaign is insanely short. You could probably finish this in under 30 minutes. So, some asshole who made these levels thought he'd make the whole thing artificially difficult by unfairly ambushing the player constantly, and forcing you to take your time and not blaze through what's otherwise a pretty brisk and boring ride. The amount of enemies that get thrown at you sometimes is just ludicrous. To pad it out even more, they've really drawn out the cinematics.
Be careful. Those things will kill you.
Yeah.
What the?
Okay, I'll admit that was pretty funny. Overall though, playing as Dunya just makes you appreciate how much better the original Marine campaign was compared to this rubbish. The absolute highlight though has to be the ending, where you have to hold out against a huge swarm of Xenos with a sentry gun to assist you and a mounted machine gun with the absolute worst hit detection I've ever seen, when the aliens just run right through this thing. This might have been a good campaign if it had have developed the characters a bit. I mean look, as far as we knew, Rykov and Dunya were just a couple of assholes doing the dirty work for Weyland-Yutani. If it turned out that they were victims of circumstances, or maybe they were forced to do what they did for other selfless reasons, well, it might have made their characters more sympathetic. But this backstory adds nothing new or makes them any more likable. They're still just a couple of assholes doing the dirty work for Weyland-Yutani.
No details are to be left out.
This whole campaign may as well have just had me playing as some random, no-name Weyland-Yutani grunt, and it would have had the same effect. Next up, you've got the Predator campaign, and this one chronologically takes place before Dunya's storyline. Again, you're playing as a random predator that's only coming to the planet to hunt before he discovers the artifact. First level starts with you moving around these polygonal looking forest environments, hunting these giant worm dicks that come out of the ground. And then these things, that are about as threatening as a soft pillow. For this campaign, the Predator's got a new weapon, which is a faster firing version of the plasma caster called the Energy Flechette. But the damage it does is so low that it's about as effective as harsh language. After the first level ends, when the Predator finds the artifact, it's then stolen by Dunya, recreating what the player previously did in her campaign, and you've now got to retrieve it. But at the same time, the Predator's also dealing with a bun in the oven. You see, the poor guys fell victim to a lone facehugger. So now he's on a rush to transmit his location to his buddies, while also trying to find the artifact before he has to deal with a gaping chest cavity that's going to put an end to his hunting career. The Predator campaign is a lot longer than the corporate one. I'd say it's easily twice as long, but it still falls into the same kind of traps. Mostly in the way that it just constantly throws Xenos at you, like non-stop. To the point that the combat just lacks all meaning or purpose. You just feel like you're going through the motions every time you're attacked by another half dozen or so of these things. It's definitely more fun though with the Predator because he's just got more weapons to use. Still love the way the plasma caster locks onto enemies with that cool looking targeting reticle. Think the vision modes are awesome, and I love how faithful the sound effects are. Especially when you take some poor asshole's head off as a trophy or heal yourself. But again too, you just know this onslaught of Xenos was done to slow the player down artificially. No better example of this is the amount of goddamn Praetorians they throw at you, which are those big armored bastards. These things aren't even hard to kill, it's just they're time consuming. Then the last level's got those combat synthetics who can see through your cloak and kill you in like 2 or 3 hits with their shotguns. So that's fun. Overall, this campaign ain't all that great, and it ends expectedly with the Predator dying from a chestburster, making it even more depressing. But at least it explains how that poor guy in the corporate campaign got killed.
What the?
Finally, we get to the Alien campaign, and man, did they save the worst for last. Schumann, of course, you chose to play these in order.
Go ahead.
Alright, so this follows along a similar vein to the Alien campaign in the base game, where you start out as a facehugger, and you have to find a suitable host, and this time it's a lone predator. The same predator you just played as. Then after that, you're a defenseless chestburster that's got to find a food source to nourish itself and grow into a big boy Xeno. From this point on, it should have been fun, like playing as a Predalien should have been amazing. The whole thing is awesome in concept, it should have been good in game. But it's not, it's terrible, and in an expansion pack that's already crappy and horribly put together, this somehow manages to be even worse. This campaign is the equivalent of throwing all your dirty clothes in the washing machine and thinking you're done, then looking behind the laundry bin and seeing a solitary sock that's covered in mold and smells like a sewer. Right, so for starters, let's talk about how short this is. Now, there's only 3 levels in this one like the rest of them, but for the one where you're a facehugger and then a chestburster, you're defenseless and you can't even fight back against anything, and these will only take about 5 minutes to finish. Then the 3rd level where you're finally a Predalien and should be able to go around wreaking havoc, instead you're up against more of those combat synthetics, and all these gun turrets that melt you in seconds. So as a result, you have to take things very cautiously, always on the lookout for that next minigun wielding enemy that can cut you to ribbons. On top of that, head bites don't seem to refill as much health as they used to, and there's far less human enemies to refill it with. Oh yeah, and you can't even use the head bite on those combat synthetics. So you're just constantly scrimping by, playing it super conservatively instead of being able to go around and rip things to pieces. It just takes all of the fun out of the whole thing. It pisses me off. It pisses me off. Lastly, the layout for the levels is so piss poor and confusing that you never know where you're supposed to be going half the time. But again, like so many other factors, I do have a feeling they've made the level design this confusing so it takes players longer to finish it. Do you know what I'm saying? They made it confusing on purpose so it would take longer. That's my theory anyway. The only positive thing about it, I guess, is that it's over quickly. The first 2 levels, like I said, will take 5 or 10 minutes to finish, then the final level will probably take 15 or 20. So it's like pulling off a band-aid, over a period of like 30 to 45 minutes. This whole expansion pack is a good example of how an amazing base game can be ruined by bad level design, bad pacing, and just being thrown together by people who seem to have no idea what the hell they were doing. It's like eating a meal from a fancy restaurant and then throwing it up and trying to re-eat it. You know what, that's actually a disgusting analogy, I apologise. Even less of a reason to play this thing is that it's so hard to get running, something the base game suffers from too. To get it running on my computer, I had to download an already installed version of the game because installing it off the CD just doesn't work for me. Then even once I did that, I still had to download a custom launcher off the internet to get it running in widescreen. Then I had to force Windows 98 compatibility so it doesn't crash all the times. Then I had to force 60 frames per second through the NVIDIA inspector, or else the game plays in double speed. Oh, and then lastly, I had to force my mouse polling rate to 125 Hz. Otherwise, the mouse moves around in this really weird pattern across the screen. And even then, it didn't fix it, it just reduced the severity. So finally, there's 2 big takeaways from this whole video, which I hope I can leave you with. Firstly, the original AVP2 is still awesome, and we need some kind of remaster as soon as possible. This is a really fun shooter that still stacks up, and everybody should play it.
You've got more balls than brains, son.
Secondly, Primal Hunt is horrible and a complete waste of time. There's far better expansion packs out there and far better ways to waste a couple of hours.
Damn it.
So you know what? I say we take off and nuke the entire expansion pack from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.